rain pounded relentlessly on the windshield of my new electric car. I was driving to college, excited about the possibilities that lay ahead. Graduation had been a joyous occasion, and my parents had surprised me with a sleek car as a gift. The world seemed full of promise as I navigated the winding road through the dense forest. But then, without warning, everything changed. The car's dashboard flickered, and the engine sputtered to a halt. Panic gripped my chest as I realized something was horribly wrong. I tried to restart the car, but it was lifeless, a victim of some sort of EMP. The rain obscured my vision as I stepped out into the downpour, desperately searching for any sign of help. My cell phone displayed nothing but a blank screen, another victim of the EMP that damaged the car. My heart raced as I glanced around, realizing that I was stranded in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by towering trees that seemed to close in on me. As I stood there, soaked and shivering, I couldn't help but reflect on the irony of the situation. Here I was, a young college student with dreams of the future, and now I was alone in the dark forest, vulnerable and defenseless. Just when despair threatened to consume me, I heard the rumble of an approaching vehicle. Relief washed over me as a massive pickup truck pulled up beside my disabled car. The driver was a rugged-looking man, his face hidden beneath a thick beard and his clothes soaked from the rain. He introduced himself as Jake, a lumberjack who lived in a remote cabin not far from here. Jake offered to take a look at my car, but the problem was beyond his expertise. It seemed like the entire world had gone dark, and we were left to fend for ourselves. He kindly offered to give me a lift to the nearest town, which was still miles away. I accepted hesitatingly. I felt something was not right, but I told myself I have no choice in this situation. As we drove deeper into the forest, I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. The relentless rain made it difficult to see, and the forest seemed to swallow us whole. As I stood there, rain pouring down, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was terribly wrong with Jake. His eyes, shadowed by the brim of his hat, held a sinister glint that sent shivers down my spine. He began to speak in a low, menacing tone, revealing the depths of his malevolence. "You know," he said with a chilling smile, "these woods, they have a way of swallowing people up, especially those who don't belong." His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken menace. With each sentence that dripped from his lips, he painted a grim picture of his dark past. He spoke of the people who had crossed his path and never returned, their fates forever sealed within the heart of the forest. It was as if he reveled in the fear he instilled in me, as if he relished the power he held over my trembling form. As I listened to his unnerving stories, I couldn't deny the growing realization that I was in the presence of a true threat. The reality I had thought I knew was shattered, and I was now trapped in a car with a man who seemed more like a harbinger of doom than a savior. The rain continued to fall relentlessly as Jake and I journeyed deeper into the forest. The world around us grew darker, and my unease intensified with every passing mile. There was something undeniably sinister in the air, and it clung to us like a shadow. My senses were on high alert, and I couldn't ignore the growing tension between us. Jake's presence, once a glimmer of hope, now seemed like a dangerous liability. A feeling of impending doom hung heavy in the air. And then it happened. In a moment of chilling intensity, Jake stepped on the brakes and his hand disappeared beneath his rain-soaked jacket, and he revealed a knife, its blade gleaming ominously in the dim light of the car's interior. The sight of the weapon sent a shockwave of fear through me, and I realized that the man I had thought would help me had become the very threat I had feared all along. The realization was like a punch to the gut, and my heart raced as I understood the direness of my situation. The ordinary world I had known had crumbled, leaving me isolated and vulnerable in the heart of the sinister forest, with the true nature of my companion revealed in the most horrifying way possible. He looked at me with evil excitement in his eyes and said, "I love a good hunt." As I was still realizing the meaning of those words, he hissed, "Run." I leaped out of the truck and into the drenching rain, my heart racing. I could hear Jake's heavy footsteps close behind me as I sprinted into the forest. The relentless downpour masked my footsteps, but I could hear his predatory growls as he pursued me, his voice filled with malicious intent. My internal struggles came into play as fear and desperation drove me deeper into the forest. Every step I took felt like a step closer to my doom, yet I couldn't stop running. I knew that I had to stay one step ahead, but I couldn't ignore the overwhelming sense of isolation and vulnerability that enveloped me. I glanced over my shoulder, realizing that Jake was closing in with terrifying speed. Desperation surged through me as I reached for a branch, but I was too slow. He closed the distance between us, and the glint of his knife in the dim forest light filled me with dread. With a swift, vicious strike, he slashed the knife across my arm. Pain seared through me as I cried out, stumbling and dropping the branch. Blood oozed from the wound, mixing with the rain that soaked my clothes. I clutched my injured arm, feeling the warmth of my life's essence flowing between my fingers. Jake's malevolent laughter filled the air as he reveled in my pain and fear. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I was not just running for my life, I was now wounded, vulnerable, and trapped in this nightmarish game of survival. I started running again through the rain-soaked forest with all my strength, but I felt more alone and trapped than ever before. My breath came in ragged gasps, and I stumbled over roots and rocks, my body aching with exhaustion. The isolation I had felt from the beginning of this night had intensified, and I could no longer deny the direness of my circumstances. The threat was stronger than ever, and the situation felt insurmountable. I couldn't help but blame myself for being in this predicament, for not seeing the darkness within Jake sooner. The relentless pursuit had taken a toll on my body and my psyche, leaving me teetering on the brink of despair. As I continued to flee through the rain-soaked forest, a spark of hope ignited within me. My racing thoughts converged on one idea: I needed a way to turn the tables on Jake. Suddenly, I remembered something Jake had mentioned in the truck: his fear of heights. With newfound determination, I sprinted toward a steep slope in the forest. My heart pounded as I ascended the incline, slipping and sliding in the mud. The rain made the ground treacherous, but I pressed on. At the top, I found a sheer drop, a cliff overlooking a ravine. The realization struck me like lightning. I knew how to defeat the threat that pursued me. I waited at the edge of the cliff, my heart pounding in my chest, rain-soaked clothes clinging to my trembling body. The sound of Jake's footsteps grew louder, his rage-fueled breaths echoing through the trees. As he burst from the shadows, knife gleaming malevolently, I knew I had only one chance to survive. With a scream, he lunged at me, the knife slashing through the air. I sidestepped his attack just in time, but the blade grazed my side, leaving a searing wound. Pain shot through me as I stumbled back, blood mixing with the rainwater that soaked my clothes. Undeterred, I grabbed a fallen branch, my fingers wrapping around it tightly. With every ounce of strength and determination, I swung it at Jake, striking him square in the chest. He grunted in pain, his grip on the knife weakening. In the chilling dance of survival, we clashed again and again, my injured side throbbing with each movement. The forest bore witness to our desperate struggle, a brutal contest of life and death in the pouring rain. Finally, with one last powerful blow, I sent Jake reeling backward. He teetered on the edge of the cliff, his eyes wide with terror. With a final scream, he toppled over the precipice, disappearing into the darkness below. I stood there, gasping for breath, rain mixing with the tears on my cheeks. Victory had come at a cost, the pain of my wound a constant reminder of the night's horrors. Yet, I had survived the harrowing confrontation, and the forest seemed to exhale a sigh of relief as if releasing the malevolence that had plagued it. The relentless rain continued to drench me, and I clutched my wounded arm, where Jake's knife had left a deep gash. Every heartbeat sent waves of agony radiating through my body, and I could feel the warm, sticky blood seeping through my fingers. But it wasn't just the physical wounds that weighed on me, it was the emotional toll of the night's horrors. I had been forced to fight for my life against a man who had revealed his true, malevolent nature. The isolation, the terror, and the desperation had left scars that went far beyond the physical injuries. As I stood there, alone in the unforgiving forest, the pain was not just a result of my stub wound, but a reflection of the deep emotional trauma that had been etched into me. The rain that had once been a mere inconvenience now felt like a cold reminder of the darkness I had faced. The relentless rain continued to pour down, its cold embrace soaking me to the bone as I made my way back to the spot where my broken car lay. The forest seemed to close in around me, still harboring secrets I could only begin to fathom. The rain, unrelenting and unforgiving, seemed to wash away the physical evidence of our battle, but the scars it left on my body and soul would endure. Finally reaching my car, I climbed inside. The interior was drenched from the storm. The rain showed no signs of letting up, and I knew that the horrors of that night would forever haunt me.